Okay, and we'll let everyone in.
All right.
Welcome, everybody. Looks like we've got a great group here. Hope you're all having a nice afternoon and had a chance to join us for a few of the other sessions today. I see some familiar faces. And just give everyone a few more minutes here to enter. We've got a couple of people coming in the waiting room.
Sure.
All right. So I think we can get started. So welcome to day 3 of the New York State Craft Brewers Conference. Today is sponsored by Maglighter Hand Trucks, as well as our session sponsors we'd like to thank, which Ironheart Canning. We have Roger here from Ironheart, who is also sponsoring the sessions today. Precision Fermentations and Drink Tanks. I've put some links here in the chat. We have a great resources page up on the New York State Craft Brewers Conference website, NYSCBC.com. So feel free to visit that page. There's lots of great info from our sponsors and allies, and you can see a few of the links here in the chat to visit those pages. So without further ado, we can get right into everything. I'll just ask that you keep yourself on mute unless you have a question. If you do have a question, please enter it in the chat box and I will call on your name to unmute yourself and ask Roger or John what you've got on your mind. So we've got Roger Kissling from Ironheart Craft Brewing here, as I'd mentioned before, and John Kelley from Craftpeak. So I'll hand it over to you guys to get started here.
Yeah, sounds great. Chloe, thank you very much. And as Chloe mentioned, I'm John Kelley. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Craftpeak. We're Asheville-based, we're North Carolina, Asheville-based business. And Roger, I'll turn it over to you to give a little intro on Ironheart, although
very good.
Sure folks are well aware of Ironheart.
So Roger Kissling again, Vice President. I'm a partner in the company in our geography, which covers 25 states and about 28 warehouses. So you see that slide, John and I missed that on the updates, but established in 2013 and have grown organically since then. We run 60 canning lines. We'll package about 95 million cans this year. That will put us at about 250 million cans of filling experience since our inception, in a variety of can sizes with a variety of different products. But of course, our core is craft beer, and our headquarters are based in New Hampshire. I personally am based in New Jersey. So the nature of my business, I'm a bit of a gypsy, but for this presentation, of course, I'm going to stay in my lane and talk mostly about canning. So I want to leave you with a big piece of our philosophy, is start that way, I should say. Packaging is the gatekeeper to your beer and your brand. So your beer will only be as good as the packaging process. Packaging can only make the beer worse. Our job is to diminish that quality as close to zero as possible. John?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll kick it off here again. So we are a technology company based out of Asheville, North Carolina. We work with about 150 breweries across the US and other beverage companies. Quite a few folks in New York, and we're excited to be able to participate in CBC with you today. And Roger, and just a little background here, we build e-commerce, direct-to-consumer, and web solutions for the craft beverage industry. And as Roger mentioned, we want this to be pertinent to what we're hearing from breweries right now. And I think what we'll do just to kind of kick it off is, I'm sure lots of folks have been starting this way, where we're talking a little bit about the state of the industry, and that's both some of the residual constraints that we have related to COVID, and also what it looks like kind of beyond COVID. So as we look at that, I think what we'll use to kind of frame today's conversation is that social distancing remains in place. Tap rooms are kind of left with limited capacity and hours. We're optimistic about what the future holds, but there's still some uncertainty that remains. We've also seen over the past year, the rise and acceleration of new sales channels, particularly direct consumer and online. And the reason that this pairing between Craftpeak and Ironheart really has been set up for this discussion for you all is that getting your liquids in package is what allows you to have additional options right now. So it all starts with getting your liquid in packaging, and also that's what's going to give you the best shot and allow you to participate in the most channels. But in order to get us started there, Roger, I'll turn it back over to you. But as you've seen Roger and his team, what I think is going to be insightful for the audience today is that this isn't one guy that's worked on one packaging or bottling line. This is a group that works with lots of different breweries out there. They've seen a number of different situations. They've got their fingers on the pulse of the supply issues and all of the other challenges that go into getting your liquids and packages. So I think if you are looking to start moving your beer into cans, this is a great presentation for you. If you are already moving in that direction and looking to improve that, you're also going to learn a lot here. So Roger, without further ado, I'll kick it back to you here.
Mm-hmm. So staying in my lane, so to speak, and focusing on packaging and cans specifically. Why? Well, because I represent Ironheart Canning, of course, not Ironheart Bottling. But as you can see in the slide, cans are now the preferred packaging for craft in America. No surprise there for everybody on this call, but I like to start by saying in 2013, when Ironheart was started, of course, everybody was talking about bomber bottles, right? And canning beer was for cheap beer, you know, the big houses can beer. And what a difference 8 years has made. So, you know, 8 straight years of cans gaining share from bottles. It's now the majority of packaged beer volume in the US and of course, hugely craft driven. So benefits to cans, there are a few of them. You can see I list them here, but some people would say it's better for the beer. I think the big one for this presentation, of course, is the options that John is going to talk about a little bit later on, but it's better quality to go. You know, taproom options, traditional taproom options. The biggest downside to them I've always found is that they're variable in quality and you have less control over the quality once it leaves your tap room. So cans are a great option there. I also always pitch them as the best business card that you could have going out in the market. So every time somebody purchases a 4-pack of your 16-ounce cans with your label artwork and brings them out, takes a picture of them, shares them on social media, brings them to a party, it's a business card for the brewery going out. And let's be honest, cans are trendy. It's what people want. I was in the city at a hype brewery some months back, and they were packaging in 12-ounce cans, and I actually saw a guy get animatedly upset because he couldn't trade a 12-ounce can. He needed a 16-ounce can to be able to trade that beer, which I just thought was fantastic and humorous at the same time. But in general, you know, through a lot of equipment innovation and quality mobile services being an option, you know, canning is for breweries of all sizes. So you can go to the next slide, John.
You got it.
So I'm going to review just as quickly and high level as I can an overview of some fundamental components of quality canning. This is the list I'm going to cover really quickly, from canning equipment, beer preparation, seam integrity, quickly touch on cleanliness and CIP sanitation practices, a little bit about quality filling, measurables, goals, philosophy, machine condition, performance, standards of the operator, and then the last 3 I'm throwing on one slide: archiving, testing, repeatable SOPs, best practices, can issues. Then I'm going to speak a little bit about kind of benefits of mobile. Of course, I'm a little biased towards that, but it's a great option for anybody to jump into cans right away. And then materials and artwork options, and then quick cost illustrations specifically for mobile. And then I'll pass the mic back to John. So the goal here is getting you in a package and doing the best we can to keep that quality high. So canning equipment. Not all canning equipment is created equal, of course, but there are a lot of options from you. I think the most important thing here is that over the last couple of years, there's options of all sizes and throughputs, but you do get what you pay for. It's not just speed. Ironheart uses all Wild Goose canning lines, so we're using all inline fillers. We find it's a great unit. The quality is there, they're bulletproof, and they work well for us. But there are a lot of different options, everything from a hand seamer to tabletop seamers, all the way up to rotary head fillers. But it's not just speed. There's a lot of different things that you need to consider. Of course, as you pay more for a canning line, variability in quality decreases, but you don't have to pay $1 million for a filler. They're more cost-effective options, but as your costs decrease, the need for operator expertise increases. You know, with a beer gun and a hand seamer, can you get excellent DO? Yeah, you can, but you have to be really good at it, and you have to have it dialed in. As automation decreases, your labor costs increase, you know, and this is a big consideration now for a lot of smaller breweries that didn't plan on cans, you know, and selling cans out of the tap room being a huge part of their business. Hand seaming is important, but you don't get a lot of throughput for a day of canning on a hand seamer, and it takes a lot of labor to do it. But as your throughput and automation increases, you're going to pay for that, but also you're going to pay for it on maintenance costs and complexity too. So I'm not here to plug any specific type of piece of canning equipment, but there's a lot of options out there, and you want to size it appropriately for what you're doing, what your needs are, and also think about where you want to be in the future. Next slide, John. Preparing beer preparation. If you have any experience with bottling, you know, the majority of craft beer is filled on inline fillers, and it's not a counter pressure option. So to put it simple, temperature and carbonation are super important. Hitting those targets will allow you to optimize machine performance. We always recommend our official Ironheart spec is anywhere from 33 to 35 degrees Fahrenheit and 2.4 to 2.6 volumes of carbonation. That's a real sweet spot that we like to operate in. Some beer styles or preferences might fall outside of those ranges, and that's okay. But if you push the boundaries, you can push bad results. Also, variability in beer spec for the same style, day for day, canning for canning. That's also difficult because you're relearning the wheel every time. So consistency is key, and it is an overriding factor always. Dissolved oxygen is, you know, probably the biggest one that everyone's talking about, has been talking about, will continue to talk about, but keeping that freshness and maintaining that freshness and quality in the can is the ultimate. Taking the beer from the larger package in the tank, moving it into a smaller vessel, and keeping it as changing the quality of that as close to zero as possible is most important. We always talk about low tank DO is low can DO. So, you know, I'm not a brewer, but button up your brewing process. The better you can deliver it to the packaging phase, the better results you can achieve through packaging. So I should mention at the end of each one of these slides, I have a quick list of some equipment or process needs. Some are necessary, some are nice to have. I'm not going to go through them in detail unless there's something I really wanted to mention, but we always recommend using a Zom and Nagel or better carbonation device. And I think that's probably the biggest key here. And if you have $10,000, you know, to spend on a DO meter, that's something that you need if you're really obsessed with DO. Next slide, John. Seam integrity. So not if you'll need adjustments or repairs, it's when. Seams are, in my experience, the most misunderstood part of canning specifically. The components of the seamers have a lifespan. They do need to be maintained. They do need to be adjusted. You need to check your seams before startup every day, during canning every day. So I put a little resource here at doubleseam.com. Good place to check out, learn some components of the seam and some common causes of bad seams if you're doing canning yourself. Check, QC. Leaking cans are not only damaging to your brand, they're detrimental to quality. So equipment processing needs, these are different things that are used to measure seams. We use CMC Kunke imagers throughout our company as well, which is kind of the ultimate. We're able to then full seam reports on all of our seamers on a regular basis to ensure that they're in check, aside from our daily checks. Next slide, John. I really pared down this slide for the purposes of this presentation, because if you're a brewer, and you're running a brewery, you know that that sanitation is of paramount importance, but cleaning is always the best preventative maintenance. I've seen some pretty terrible pieces of canning equipment in the future. It's just in the past, it's just elbow grease. Just keep the canning line clean. It's the last step in the process. Don't skimp on it. The other thing that's important here is just to consider different styles of beer and their ability to cross-contaminate each other when they actually get to a packaging line. So without getting into huge detail, keeping different yeast pitches, keeping STA1, gene yeast, Saison yeast, canning in proper order, running CIP in between those products, because one strain of yeast, which is perfectly fine in one beer, can be a contaminant in another. We don't can true sours because we like the product to be stable at the time of canning. Fermentation continues or yeast chews it down, you're going to end up with gushers. You're going to end up with a beer that tastes different than when you put it into can. Next slide, John. So quality filling, to run through this real quick. I already mentioned that beer preparation is where it starts, but then once you have that dialed in, it is really optimizing your fills and getting consistency. With filling accuracy and filling weights, of course, that's super important. Most of the machines are operator driven. So if you get 10 different people running the same machine, you're going to get 10 different results. And I know that comes down to expertise, but that said, some things that you have to pay attention to, of course, the big three here: filling accuracy, DO pickup and minimization, loss minimization. So there's no other way around filling accuracy that is to do constant and continual checks. Not everybody has an automatic weight checker, but once you're dialing in that beer, and recommend doing this, of course, by specific gravity, and then fill weight charts based on what type of a can you're using, a sleeve can or a blank can. So having accurate precision scales, calibration weights, checking your weights and making sure they're within an acceptable range, and then keeping that there, that's filling accuracy. DO pickup minimization, there's a lot of little tips and tricks. Really depends on your equipment, so I can't get into super detail. But an interesting thing that I always like to put out there is, if you're running your own packaging line, or you see a mobile canner running the packaging line and it's just, woo, we're zipping along as fast as possible. Can I make the machine go any faster? No, that's usually a recipe for not good dissolved oxygen. That's usually a recipe for high pickup. It's funny, but operating the machine right in that happy level where you're generating the proper amount of foam, capping on a nice cap of foam, that's the goal. Not being able to see any beer when the lid gets dropped on, not seeing any fish eyes. And if your beer is too cold or undercarb, you're not going to get good DO. The key is to set repeatable procedures and targets, get your beer in spec, understand your machine, and then making sure you're doing the testing to verify that you're doing it appropriately, and then repeating that. And then loss minimization, I don't think I need to go into why that's important, but every drop counts. Every drop that goes on the floor doesn't drive revenue for your tap room, doesn't drive revenue for your brewery. So keep your machines maintained, but then also the more stops equal more loss. So every time you have to stop, beer warms up in a hose, or every time you have to stop and then redial in, you're going to have more loss. So efficiencies, preparation, help eliminate that. Simple things like having your labeler set up so you're not stopping for the labeler, having your cans ready, or downstream and upstream. Those are the stops that can also stop the filler and cause more loss too. Next slide. These two, once again, also fairly obvious, but a couple things I want to point out to here is, if you have a happy machine, you're going to have better results. They're finicky pieces of equipment, canning lines, let's be honest, right? So upkeep and preventative maintenance are really important, because then you're not going to have a failure when it's important. You're going to have you're going to prevent failures. You're going to limit the number of you're going to limit downtime. You're going to limit those number of stops because of mechanical failure. Already mentioned cleaning is the best preventative maintenance, but an extensive backup part system on hand. very often overlooked. It's an expense, but in the end, it will save you money. It will save you time. Know which parts of your equipment are going to fail, know what the life of those are, and have them on hand so you're not waiting a week for a part, so you're not pushing back canning, so you're not delaying a taproom release that you have scheduled. Ultra important. And then standards of the operator. Look, not everybody can have a dedicated packaging manager that is trained and that is knows what they're doing, but that's the goal, obviously. Having expertise with the equipment and the beer is important, but also having the correct philosophy for packaging. Talk to a lot of brewers or people that are formally educated, go to brew school. They agree with my assessment that a lot of times that's taught in brew school, but if somebody's coming from an outside industry or something, maybe they don't get it, right? But that is that when you take beer from a tank and put it into a package, you're only going to make it worse. You have to make it you have to limit that degradation in quality as close to zero as possible. Is it ever possible to do it zero? No. But you want to get it as close to zero as possible. So it's funny, but that philosophy is really, really important. The opposite of that philosophy is just stick it in can, right? Let's just get the packaging done and move on. That's the opposite. So standards of the operator. Now, of course, with Ironheart, with mobile, that's something that we provide, that we bring to the table. But I'll get to that a little bit later. Next slide, John. And the last three I wanted to throw on one slide here, and that is archiving and testing program. Always be taking tank and can samples. We always take can samples from every single run, and you archive them for as long as you think you're going to be selling that beer out in the market. Basically what your desired shelf life is, maybe a little bit longer. If you still have beer in inventory that you're selling out of the tap room, you're obviously going to have archive samples, but keep your archive samples. Maybe you keep some and you force age some of them as well. If you are distributing and you have beer out of distributor, keep your archive samples as long as that beer is out in the market or in the distributor. And then also don't overlook date coding and time stamping of all of your cans. You have to pay for a date coder or a time stamper, but it's absolutely worth it. It's a huge component of quality. It's a huge component of being able to track inventory. And if there ever is an issue, it also reduces the impact that has, because you're able to limit it to a specific period in time or a specific run. Repeatability. SOPs and best practices. I mentioned dedicated packaging staff or people that run your canning line. Maybe it's not what they do all the time, but consistency can only be achieved if what's being done is repeatable. And that's across personnel, and that's across days, and that's across different styles of beer that you're canning. So whatever your process is, it's customized to your environment, but document it. Make sure that there's a shared knowledge, right? That if you have somebody that knows what they're doing, you're able to document it and you're able to pass that on. Should you have turnover, should somebody else need to step in and run the canning line, you're losing as little as possible through that. And then also everybody is involved in quality, from the person that puts the pack tech on the beer at the end of the canning line to the person that loads cans on. You know, somebody who loads cans onto the end of the canning line, they're looking for dented cans. They're looking for damaged cans. They're making sure that they're not sticking their fingers inside of the cans. They're not picking cans up off of the floor and putting them onto the canning line. And then the person packing out or putting pack techs on, looking at the labels, for example, making sure labels are going on straight, package looks sharp, making sure there's no double lids, making sure that there's no issue with leakers or cans feel light. Everybody plays a role. And then finally, can issues. Making sure you're storing your beer as best as possible post-packaging, keeping it cool, keeping it dry. Cold storage is always recommended, especially for sour beers or other products. If there is product on the exterior of the cans, it will corrode. That will spread like a virus throughout the entire pallet, and you'll have a mess on your hands. A couple other things to consider with can. Is compatibility, pH. This is much less of an issue than it was in 2018 and even 2019 when they started coming out with BPA-NI liners and transitioning from epoxy to BPA-NI. The new generations of BPA-NI are performing very, very well with lower pH products, but it's still something to be cognizant of. at the very least, if you're sourcing cans and you're sourcing your own materials, know what's in that can, know what that liner is, and know what the capabilities and limitations of that are. Finally, we talked about different styles, but also different strains of yeast. Saison styles, can they be canned? Certainly. Will they continue to change over time? Will they continue to chew down? Yes, possibly. You could end up with gushers. You can end up with overcarbonated beer if it's not terminal. Of course, we all know of diastaticus. Those strains of yeast, if you have a contamination issue, will also, of course, ruin your beer. And then can issues, the one that's not on here, but is the quote unquote candemic, of course. Getting the cans themselves can be an issue now here in 2020, at the end of 2020 and 2021. Another thing we have to thank the virus for. So, increased demand not only in craft beer but in other beverages, of course, is pinching the market a little bit. So, securing supply, having different vendors, always super important, because if you're out of cans, you're out of business.
Roger, on that topic, Tim Garman had actually brought that up in the chat before you had just touched base on it. Tim, did you want to ask your question regarding the pandemic?
Yeah, I was just wondering if you had any insight to an end in sight. Are you experiencing it? Is there hope?
There's absolutely hope, Tim. I'm always an eternal optimist. There will be a shortage of domestic supply that will likely stretch out for, Credit Suisse did an in-depth study that likely will stretch out through next year. Does that mean that we are in a terrible state? No. The void or the shortfall of domestic supply is being filled by international supply. It is, they are adding capacity, but it will be a slow turnaround. So what we are seeing currently is an influx of cans from China, an influx of cans from Malaysia and Jordan and Europe. There's some added complexities that arise from different can manufacturers, different specs, different tolerances, but I think that the void is being filled currently. Of course, there are going to be situations where the can companies know where their bread is buttered, and their bread is not buttered in the small can customer. So what's happened is smaller orders, smaller needs, a lot of smaller craft breweries, they have been pushed away from dealing directly with can manufacturers. All those orders have to go through third-party suppliers. Printed cans are very hard to get on schedules. But by and large, the overall supply, I think, will be there. There certainly is risk. I know from somebody who supplies 70 million cans every year that we have done, it's been a lot of work to shore up our supply chain, make sure that we have a robust strategy for 2021, pumping from different wells, using multiple suppliers so all our eggs are not in one basket. So I know that our supply is secure throughout the year, but it's not without effort. So once again, I'm an optimist. Is it something to be cognizant of and be aware of? There absolutely that there will be a bit of a shortage here for a while.
Okay, thanks, man.
Next slide, John. And then, I can't help myself, but benefits of mobile. I'm a believer. Obviously, I think there's a lot of advantages to doing mobile, but really being completely plug and play is important. We take care of the hard work. Most of the people I know that are in craft beer are not in craft beer because they're passionate about standing next to a canning line. They're passionate about craft beer because they want to focus on making the best liquid possible, marketing their brand, dealing with people. So we take that we take that out of the equation from a mobile service provider standpoint. You also can avoid capital expense. Some of what John I know is going to talk about, strategies for driving revenue, that doesn't necessarily come without investment. Doesn't come without investment in marketing and growing your brand, having a salesperson, who knows. But all of those things take cash, they take investment. Mobile allows you to do that without having to invest in a canning line and build it. Also, our pricing is based around per case margins that are similar to an in-house canning line. I'm going to go into a cost example, so I don't need to go into that. But it is certainly as profitable to keep with mobile. We mentioned overhead. The biggest cost of canning is really in the labor. It's in the expertise, not necessarily in the equipment, because there are certainly small options. But once again, avoiding maintenance, avoiding that labor, staying lean and mean is important. Can size flexibility, that's also important in this realm here too. Just being able to switch between sizes, maybe launching a seltzer in 12-ounce sleek cans, taking advantage of a convenience opportunity with 19.2-ounce stovepipes, trying slim sizes for whatever reason, doing an imperial stout in an 8-ounce stubby. All that's super simple with mobile. You don't need changeover parts. You don't need anything. You just need to pick up the phone. And then obviously what Ironheart brings is a real commitment to quality. And I believe that we offer turnkey quality because of our expertise. That's a little bit better than what you can get right out of the gate on your own. With 250 million cans filled, we should be doing it better. And that's our commitment. So just a couple benefits of mobile, but we're the right size. We're scaled to fit your needs. Don't worry about seasonality. Don't worry about if you have to scale up. We have your capacity needs covered. Don't worry if you're canning 15 barrels every 3 months, just as good. So quick consideration on different materials. So if you're going to get into cans, you have some basic options. We have sleeved cans, we have blank cans with labels, and then printed cans are here, but there are some hurdles to getting into printed cans. I'm going to talk very quickly about each one's. The cost of sleeved cans and blank cans are actually coming a little bit closer together with the increased cost of aluminum through the pandemic, through the shortage. But by and large, blank cans with labels are still going to be a bit of a slightly more cost-effective option per unit than shrink sleeve cans. They also offer a little bit more flexibility, being able to switch label rolls out or adjust production based on what you want to do. Sleeved cans do have some MOQs. They're typically on the lower side and they're not an issue, but when you get the cans in, you're going to fill what you have. What you don't fill, you're either going to have to wait till a future canning or they're going to be trash. The only added kind of hidden cost here in blank cans with labels, look, I'm pulling this from my material as a mobile service provider. So we do charge for labeling service. If you're not using a labeling service, you need to purchase a labeler, which is an added capital expense, but so that's got to be baked into your analysis with sleeve versus blank cans. These are your biggest options. There are then of course printed cans, but very hard to get on schedules, and also a 25 full height pallet MOQ per SKU, long lead times, and that's a lot of cans to take on at one time. So these printed cans, rough materials cost examples, I offer a specific program that includes free storage if it's a right fit for you. So these cost figures are really just illustrations. They're of course not set in stone. There's a lot of different options and suppliers out there. And then John is going to talk a lot about different channels and profitability. So I don't want to dwell on this, but I just wanted to quickly show it. Mobile is a quick option to getting in a package that unlocks the key, right? Once you get it into cans, John's going to tell you how to sling it. John's going to tell you how to make the most out of it. But you could see, I just want you to focus on kind of total cost here, total service and materials. This is a real, quick analysis, but if you're doing, the assumptions here are blank cans with labels, $12 a case for 12-ounce cans, $16 or $15 a case for 16-ounce cans. That's going to cover all your materials, mobile canning service, labeling service. That's your cost. Now, beer production cost, of course, is variable. But that's the total cost estimation at 3 cents per can per ounce. You're looking at about $21 for a 24-pack case of 12-ounce cans and $27 for a 24-pack of 16-ounce cans. And that's what you're looking for. Or that's what you will be looking for approximately. Of course, we know the Taproom is the golden goose. And of course, we know you take a haircut on distro. But once again, I'm not going to step on John's presentation. These are just some basic analyses that I wanted to throw out there. And with that, I'm going to hand the mic back over to John Kelley with Craftpeak.
Yeah, well, thanks, Roger. Man, whoever knew so much goes into canning, buddy. So this is, as Roger mentioned, what we're going to do with the second half of this presentation is really talk about, okay, now that you've got options with your beer and package, what is the avenue here? What are the options? What are the channels available? And as we know, there's lots of places that you can sell your beer. Here's just a couple of the typical ones that we see with all breweries. So Taproom, of course, is one that's familiar to everybody, and we know that's a high margin environment. Online and direct consumer sales is something that we've seen accelerated by COVID and really evolve and adapt over the last year. And we're going to be spending some time there, but really those first two are kind of both your direct to consumer channels. Those are the ones that you can control directly with the consumer. Wholesale distribution, import, export, third-party marketplaces, those are all where you're working with someone else through an intermediary. All potentially viable channels for your business. There's lots of different places where you're going to connect with consumers and your beer, but they're not all created equal. In fact, there's a different cost structure associated with each one of these channels. So when we're really talking about increasing sales, what we like to do is translate that not even into revenue, but really profit and cash for the business. Because with the beer that you have in a tank, that can go in any of these channels, but depending on where you put it, you're going to develop different margins based on the cost of sale. So it costs you the same amount of money to get it into a can, and then where you get that can and where you sell that can has an impact there. So if your cost of goods are kind of established up to your finished product, then where you're going to make the additional margins is on the efficiency of the sales side of things, and that's where we're going to spend some time today. Okay. So from there, I think the first thing is that we're going to be talking a lot about, the conditions that we're dealing with right now. And, part of that is making sure that as we're talking about additional revenue for the tap room is like, where are the places that we can maximize tap room revenue? And if we're down to 25% occupancy and we've got restrictions on hours, well, that's a really tough model. We didn't build these breweries around a 25% customer allocation. So, and I think what we also need to realize is that the consumers that were standing in our tap room, a year ago at this point and earlier, I think there was a tendency to kind of think about them all the same. Well, I think now we've realized through COVID that there's different level of comfort and people are making different buying decisions based on their level of comfort and security, especially related to COVID. Now, I think we're all bullish and optimistic that things are headed in the right direction, but it still remains that there's a lot of unknowns and things to navigate between here and there. So part of it is making sure that we can navigate this new guest experience. So as customers have different levels of familiarity and comfort with coming back into tap rooms, there's not really a one size fits all model. So I think if we're just talking about the tap room sales channel, it's going to be important to make sure that everybody kind of knows what the protocol is related to COVID, social distancing. We want a welcoming experience. Clear expectations and communicating those expectations, through all of your channels. So website, social media, when people show up on site, to make sure that there's signage and cues available. Part of a very having a great hospitality experience is also making sure that we do a good job inviting folks back. So not only making sure that they feel comfortable while they're here, but that they're invited back. And then something that is, if we're talking about increasing sales, well, this was basically a survey that we did, a State of the Union with Arrived. And I think, probably most of you are very familiar with Arrived, but we did that last fall. And I think we were surprised to see that there aren't a ton of breweries that were offering to-go sales. And I think that this is a missed opportunity in a lot of tap rooms. Big glass door fridge right next to the register is kind of step one, making sure that people know that there's packaged beer available to go. And then the second thing is really, it's kind of old school retail, training up your staff to ask that additional question, would you like any packaged beer to go at checkout? So when somebody's checking out with you and they ask that question, Andrew Copeland from some Secret Hopper shared some details there where, you know, about 49% of the time that your staff asks that question, people are like, yeah, we'll take some extra beer. And, you know, you're going to sell them a 4-pack right there. Whereas if you compare that to the times you're not asking that question, it's about 9% of the time. So I think first thing is like, let's talk about the changes that we can make to the tap room, even the simple ones right now where we can increase sales. And those are a couple of things that I've seen have been very effective. Now, from there, if we're talking about your highest margin channels, we're talking about your direct to consumer channels. So Taproom, once again, one of those, but also your online properties that allow you to sell beer directly to consumers. So really the goal here is for you to maximize your reach by offering local pickup, delivery, and shipping options. Those are the 3 fulfillment mechanisms we've seen most breweries embrace over the last year. The idea is that you're going to provide a safe alternative for customers that aren't ready to yet get back in the tap room. And for the ones that are, it's a supplemental or differentiated channel. It allows you to connect with your existing customers in new ways and attract customers that are more inclined to buy that way. So it's really we'll be talking a lot about accessibility, convenience, and repeatability, all important things when running a business. The more repeatable it is, the more repeatable the revenue is, the more strategic that we can get around our decisions. And then it's diversified, you know, having a separate channel from your tap room that is not restricted by the location or the hours of your tap room provides a way to kind of diversify. It's durable, it's profitable. And if you do it correctly, these are ways that you're going to gain market share from other breweries who are not choosing to kind of operate in these channels. So yeah, online ordering with shipping, delivery, and pickup is something that we've seen a lot of breweries adopt over the last year. In fact, some feedback from about 1,500 breweries in an ECOS survey. Actually, this was a white paper that they published, I think it was last September or thereabouts. But at that time, these 1,500 breweries, about 56 of them were participating in an online sales channel, with 32% of those having a delivery option, whether that was staff or a third-party delivery service, and about 50% of them had curbside pickup option. So when we really kind of consider the options here, so it's one thing to kind of sell through a channel, but then there's also kind of a separate component of the fulfillment. And that fulfillment, once again, typically is curbside pickup, local delivery, and shipping. So we'll break each of those down a little bit. We could probably spend an entire time here on just the shipping component. So we'll kind of, we'll go over that one quickly, but if there's specific questions around shipping, happy to address that. We work with a lot of breweries that are kind of navigating those waters and you know, getting their beer in boxes and shipped all over. But you know, some of the considerations and opportunities for curbside pickup is determining if, you know, if you're going to sell things online, you know, do you want to have a curbside pickup program that is in advance or on demand? So, you know, all of the orders that come in today, you can pick up tomorrow, or as you're ordering it, I can then, as soon as I put that order through, I can swing by the brewery. Really kind of depends on the workflow and how you're set up, but something to consider there for sure. Scheduled windows or times. So that would be, okay, well, we know that we've got people coming to pick up beer. Do we want to give them kind of an official time slot where we can say, as a brewery, we know we can handle 5 orders every 15 minutes. So let's set up a scheduled window and allow people to kind of select their time. And then one of the open questions here, and one of the biggest challenges, is how you're going to manage inventory. You know, there's point of sale systems that have the ability to have online stores. Sometimes these things communicate with one another, sometimes they don't. But if you are trying to run both a tap room and an online store, you know, how do you make sure you're not running yourself ragged? What is the path to making sure that you've got inventory managed in one place? Or if not, what is the process to make sure you're adequately managing that inventory so that both you're you know, in service to your tap room and to your online component? All right, local delivery, you know, the considerations there, I think we've already mentioned them. Are you going to do it yourself? Are we converting taproom staff to delivery drivers? Or are we going to use a third party, Uber Eats, Postmates, you know, fill in the blank with some of the others that are proliferating out there? Once again, is this on demand or scheduled? You know, somebody going to put an order in and we're going to, you know, offer delivery within an hour or a half day? Or is this something where you order ahead of time and then once we get the orders in, we're going to kind of, you know, deliver those in the next day or so? And then, you know, once again, same consideration regardless of the fulfillment mechanism is how's that inventory managed. Shipping. This is a very interesting hot topic. Like I said, we get lots of questions around shipping, and it really kind of depends on the path. You've got some folks that are out there right now that are fully compliant or attempting to be fully compliant, which means that there's 9 states available that will allow you to set up direct consumer relationships with those states. It is kind of the laws of your state and the state that you're shipping to that are going to regulate that. But typically you have to get set up as a direct consumer retailer in those states. You have to register with the Department of Revenue. You have to then get a relationship established with typically UPS out on the West. You know, FedEx is doing it a little bit out on the West Coast. You have services like GLS. From there, it's about packaging and shipping solutions that are going to help you manage that. And then once again, how's inventory managed, which will be kind of the recurring theme. So lots that we could dive into on the shipping side, but those are kind of the basic things there. And there's, you know, lots of breweries in New York that are now shipping within New York and beyond their borders. Okay, so from here, all right, so if we're talking about, you know, the everyday sales that are, you know, offsetting or kind of complementing your taproom sales, which is a model that, you know, provides you an additional and durable sales channel. What are the other direct to consumer options to consider? Well, the ones that we work with breweries most are around online beer releases and pre-sales, memberships and bottle clubs, and subscription services. So we're going to run into each of those a little bit just to provide a little bit more background here. So first of all, on the online beer release and pre-sales, you know, the upside of considering something like this is that this can be a super hyped event for breweries. I'm sure you've all been a part of these experiences, which, you know, once it was, everybody was kind of lining up around the block. And over the past few years, that's kind of changed a little bit to more online. And, you know, there's certain breweries that take advantage of this and kind of get into a regular cadence. And when breweries do get into a regular cadence, that's not only for the workflows and efficiencies of the brewery, but it's also from the consumer perspective, making sure that your consumers know, hey, every Friday we've got a release. We're going to let you know what that release is on Monday, and then, you know, you're gonna buy it on Friday, and then you've got a week to come and pick it up. And typically when they come and pick it up, about 30% of the time they're probably buying a beer or more out of the tap room. So, you know, good cadence equals good results there. And it's a way to sell a lot of a beer very quickly. Now, the downside of that is that it can be an extremely high traffic event, which means that there's lots of considerations, both from the workflow and internal operations of the brewery. But also it can go from a situation where it's really great to not so great pretty quickly. And that usually comes in our realm where there's technology, and I'm sure everybody's been, you know, in the news and hearing about, you know, platforms failing and things like that. Well, you know, it's really tough. It's really challenging. So it does require special technology to make sure that you can handle the load, because you get these huge impact spikes when people want beers. If anybody participated in the Russian River one, you know, a few weeks ago, you know, I think the stats on that was that there was about 110,000 people trying to get 8,000 beers. So, I mean, just crazy amount of traffic for some of these releases. So really special technology that's required. And that technology is not only to handle the load, but to make sure that, you know, so things don't crash, because those are not only detrimental to the sale, but to the brand value, to the customer experience, and, you know, all kinds of social media fallout, of course, that ensues. But it's also to prevent things like oversells. Typically when things are selling really fast, it's you know, if you've got a limited release of a beer, it's really important that you don't oversell that, because that you really can't make that right if that beer is never going to be made again. And then things like cart protection, where, you know, when you're buying concert tickets and you've got 7 minutes to kind of check out, well, the same thing needs to happen here, so that if you get in your cart and looks like you've got a bottle of beer, well, if all of a sudden inventory runs out across the site, somebody can't grab that out of your cart before you check out. And those are the things that we see that typically get people pretty heated, and you can understand that. So those are the kind of upside and downside of beer releases. From there, membership clubs are kind of the second thing. We started doing membership clubs about 6 years ago, and I gotta say that we absolutely love good membership clubs. And it's really comes from a business philosophy of wanting to make sure you take care of your best supporters. You know, it's about 10% of your supporters that provide the brand value and revenue, and they're the ones that recruit a lot of other folks and speak highly of you. So, you if you are a brand that has that kind of connection with your consumers, this could be a great way to kind of just further that connection. So it's a great way to recognize and reward your biggest supporters. I've spent, the last 15 years in breweries, and I've spent a lot of time in some breweries, and the owner doesn't even know my name, and I've gotten maybe one free beer. I still go back, but it's a completely different experience when somebody like recognizes that you're one of their top customers, and they're like, hey, try this new beer, or we recommend this. Well, that's what you're really able to do from a membership program. You're able to recognize and reward those folks in some meaningful ways. The second thing is, and this is something that we kind of overlooked at the beginning, but is such an important aspect of the business, is that it's a great way to develop very positive cash flow. So if you're going to have a membership program, you can go ahead and take membership fees up front. So by announcing you're going to have a membership program and you put the details out related to it, you're going to go ahead and get everybody to subscribe in that membership program. Typically it's a year. And for our programs, it's, first right of refusal for beers that are being released. So you're selling them at full retail value, you're making full margins, and you have that additional cash flow from the membership fees. So it's a great experience, build great programs. So really what we recognize or what we would recommend you do with that money is, this is where we get to the downside, is, there's no free lunches. The money that you generate through those fees really should then be money that's invested in making this a great program. Because if you create a great program, your members are going to go bring in other members into the program. So the downside is that it can be a lot of work. It can be intimidating. There's no, like I said, there's no free lunches here. So it can be alluring, but know that there's work that goes into it to make a great program. And then, I don't want to dwell on this too much, but there can at times be a little bit of entitlement from members where they're like, well, now I'm a member of your brewery, so therefore I should be entitled to this. Well, it requires making sure that you set good boundaries, set good expectations up front. We don't see this as a major problem, but it's certainly something that, we've come across and at times we hear, some breweries having to deal with. And then, other things to consider is, do you have the space available for allowing members to maybe, you're going to hang on to their inventory until they can come and pick it up. Do you have the space and room for things like that? Additional considerations to maybe take a look at there. Okay. And guys, I'm going to speed through a couple of these just because we don't have a whole bunch of time, and I know we want to leave some time for questions. So I'll kind of go through these in summary, but we can circle back to any of them where there might be interest. All right, subscription services. This is something that is kind of on trend with consumer experience. We see lots of things that you can get in boxes delivered to your doorstep. Beer is no different. We see this much more often in the UK, where there isn't a three-tiered system, or there's a modified three-tiered system, and they're in the habit of buying things online, and they've had those shipped to their doorstep through the Royal Mail forever. But what we're really seeing is now the evolution of build your own cases, build your own mix packs. Once you get that, hey, do you want to receive this every month? Sign up for a subscription. What's cool about that is anytime you can develop a system that has more recurring revenue, that's more predictable revenue, it's revenue that you can count on, and you can more effectively and strategically manage the business at that point. And it's a way to differentiate the experience. If you're offering this and that's interesting to your consumers and somebody else isn't, then it's definitely point in your column. The downside is that subscriptions are kind of a new thing. It's a shift from the traditional. People, are just kind of getting their minds around it. In the wine world, this is what they've been counting on for years. And if you've seen any of the recent wine reports that came out last year, it used to be really big in the $100 plus bottles of wine. Well, as of 2020, there's about a 30% explosion of wines that are around, $30. So these subscription programs have really started to come down. And I think that there's a lot of technologies and capabilities that are starting to work their way into the beer world as well. So there's few benchmarks in the beer world right now to understand what the subscription attrition is. So how many people are not re-upping each month. The attrition number is always something very important when you're looking at recurring models. We don't have a lot of data to base that on in beer yet. We will down the road. And then, there's some additional effort, coordination, and technology that allows you to kind of create those mixed offerings. Okay, from here, I just wanted to get into numbers a little bit with you. And I think it's always good to drive things back to the numbers. We're always looking at the numbers. You got to be data driven. This represents what you see on the screen here represents a brewery of about 1,000 barrels a year. Typically, we see our breweries participating in a number of different channels. So if you've got taproom draft, taproom package, distribution draft, distribution package, and then online sales, you look at the percentages of allocation. So that's taking one barrel and putting 60% in the tap room, 5% online, and then kind of distributing the rest. Well, you see that your highest profit margin, no surprise, is your tap room. But if you are to change the scenario a little bit, not make any more beer, not really change your cost structure from a cost of goods perspective at all, but just simply prioritize the volume of beer into higher margin channels. You can see here, we've made the adjustment to 10% more in the tap room to go up to 70. We've upped the online a little bit. We've lowered the distribution. Well, making that one small change, if you're comparing scenario 1 and scenario 2, you can see there's about a 5% net profit margin difference, just not changing anything else, but simply where you put the beer, not changing the packaging or anything. And, these are real differences for breweries of this size. Here we can see a difference of about $64,000. Now, these aren't real numbers because this is really a tool built to kind of compare sales channels, but it does give you an idea and a tool that says, hey, you know what, if we take some of our beer and we put it here as opposed to here, what does that look like for us? And allows you to run and model those different scenarios. And really what I want to show you is that the benefits of direct consumer come from the efficiencies with which you're able to fulfill those beers. So if I go to a tap room right now, I go up to the bartender, I make a request, that bartender fills that glass for me. And then at some point in the near future, I'm going to be done drinking and I'm going to check out. They're going to scan my card. Well, that is the order, the fulfillment, and the transaction kind of all happening together. What you're able to do with a direct consumer channel is separate those things. So all the orders can come through the system. Then when the orders come through the system, you can have your staff pick and pack those orders and get them done in a very efficient way. And it's because we're able to separate those processes, we're able to optimize those. So you can see if we've got one barrel, which is about 248,000 pints, or 1,000 barrels, 248,000 pints. So this would be, what you would sell over a year. This is not factoring in any loss. But if you have a tap room that's open about 36 hours a week, 6 hours a day for 6 days, and you have 4 employees, takes about 3 minutes to, per beer, and that includes the checkout, the ordering, the interactions with the customers, 4 beers being poured concurrently versus what it would take to sell that same beer in terms of a direct labor perspective if you did it online. These are the differences. So with those assumptions, you're looking at about 3,100 hours to do it through the tap room. And that's all told with all the overhead expenses kind of factored in. And then about 1,300 on the direct consumer side. So that efficiency, that cost of labor, direct labor difference is really what adds to the difference here. So once again, a tool built more for comparison that breweries can use as a tool to start thinking about where they might want to move beer around and how they might want to change their process. But it's really, once you get below gross margin, it is the efficiency with which you sell in those channels that makes those additional margins possible. And guys, I know we're running right up on the hour here, so
Big slide.
cut it off here.
Hey, thank you so much for that. We're actually at the end of our allotted time, but if everyone has some time to stick around for 10 minutes and you want to answer questions, we can stay until 5:10 if that's okay with you guys.
Great with us, and sorry to run a little long there, gang.
No, great information. You got a lot of stuff in that time, so thank you so much. So yeah, if we want to open it up for questions, does anyone have questions? You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. Looks like Jay Smith has one.
Hey, John, can you hear me?
I can. Hi, Jay.
Hey, how are you? I see you're down in Asheville. I can see the sun pouring in your windows there, so nice to see.
Yeah, we haven't had a whole bunch of it, but it's been nice this week.
Yeah, I know. I'm up here in Rochester, New York, so I know the brewers we work with. We've always, a lot of them have experimented with, trying to get in the stores and all sorts of stuff. But they've always come back to the fact that the tap room is by far the highest gross profit. Which, as bankers, we can probably try to guess some of that. On the beer club, is is there a certain frequency that those are sent out? Is it like a monthly, or is it, because I know a lot of the wine clubs from out west do it quarterly. Is there a specific frequency that you've shown to be, better than some?
Yeah, Jay, it's a good question, and we see it a little bit all over the board. We have some breweries that I would say operate a little bit more like wineries. And we've got some barrel programs where the brewers will say, hey, listen, we don't launch anything until it's ready to go. So it becomes tough to kind of set expectations on what's going to be ready that year. So there are certainly some programs that it's, as it's ready, you're going to get it or have the opportunity to buy it. There's other programs that we do that are much more on a regular basis. And then there's some in between that will offer up a certain allocation that is part of your subscription. So you say you join for the next year at $500 a year, you're going to be guaranteed, 12 bottles of whatever, and that's going to happen, once a quarter. We're going to send you once a month. And additionally, you'll have the ability to opt in and buy through kind of a private store, other things that we're going to be releasing. And then on top of that, there can be, events that are exclusive to your membership. And those, I've seen everything from brew days, come and brew a batch with the brewer, to just special events that you have for just kind of exclusive access to those members. So, there's lots of different programs across the board. Part of what we do is help breweries kind of develop the right program. But certainly it kind of all starts with the beer and the value that you're trying to provide to your members that you think is going to be meaningful to them, and then kind of adapting the technology to support that.
Great, thanks. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also have a question from Ethan Cox. Go ahead, Ethan.
Hey there. Yeah, it's not so much a question. Sorry, it's not so much a question, but one of the things that we have found successful, this was touched upon in some of the other talks too, is the opportunity for cross branding, cross promotion that something like a subscription package gets you, because take the case of Buffalo. Buffalonians, there's expat Buffalonians everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
They never stop being Bills fans, and they never stop wanting Weber's mustard and Chevetta's sauce and other things that we can throw in as well, and kind of like as sort of a market concept. Or Typico Coffee, who's we've done a lot of partnerships with them, so we could offer their beans as well. And everybody kind of wins. We buy the beans on consignment. They don't have to deal with all the inventory management and shipping it out and all that crap. So you can kind of combine those concepts. It's and get more bang for your buck.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that. So I've got a business partner from Buffalo. We were business partners for 15 years, and that's how I ended up in Asheville. So spent a lot of time up in Buffalo and Fredonia area. So but you're exactly right. And we see a lot of our brands adapting with that. I mean, we see our brands doing coffee. We see them combining forces with CSAs. I had an example of the Duration program there that was doing subscription boxes, and you'll see that they've got all kinds of art and healthcare products that are made by local craftspeople kind of in the area. And it's exactly what you're talking about. It's a co-branding experience. People are getting a kick out of it. And then something that they're doing during COVID right now is that they'll sell a virtual event, which will be like a virtual tour of the brewery, and they'll send out a case of beer in advance of that. So everybody gets it ahead of time, and then we all get online at a certain time, and you're doing a virtual beer tasting with the brewers and doing a virtual tour, and they'll send you a notebook from a local artist and some of the some of the other products, just like you mentioned. So yeah, I think it's been cool to see the different combinations. It's definitely a growing theme, and I think the cross branding is a great way to expose new audiences to both.
And it facilitates this year's theme of the New York State Craft Brewers Conference, which is community.
Walked right into it.
Yeah. So do we have any other questions here? We have about 5 more minutes. And I did just put in the chat, our next session is at 5:30, transitioning from home brewing to commercial brewing. And there's a link to join the Zoom on that. Also, this was recorded, so you can access it on the YouTube channel as well as all of the other sessions. So please subscribe to the New York State Brewers Association YouTube channel. And if no one else has any other questions, thank you so much, John and Roger, for the awesome presentation and all the great information. And of course, for supporting the craft beer community and helping us all get through this hell of a year we just had.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, and you guys are doing awesome stuff. Roger, it was a pleasure. And yeah, if there's other questions that pop up after we drop today, feel free to reach out to us. Like Chloe mentioned, we're here to help. Everybody's trying to figure this out. We're not going to pretend we've got all the answers, but we work to make sure that we can help our breweries. So yeah, thanks for your participation, and let us know if we can help answer any further questions.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
everybody.
Will this PowerPoint be available afterwards at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to share it in any format, but you let me know what you prefer, but I could send you a PDF or it's a Google slide right now.
That's great. Yeah, if you give it to me, I can put it right up on the NYS CBC website on Ironheart's resources page.
Yeah, perfect.
Anyone that wants to access it, that's where you can find it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Roger.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.